"You can't tow my car, you maniac, this is public property," Karen shrieked as two men in navy uniforms secured her luxury SUV onto the flatbed. Her voice cracked with rage, echoing across the street while neighbors peeked from windows and recorded from porches. One of the truck operators calmly pointed at the laminated sign at the end of the driveway that read "Authorized vehicles only, leased commercial property, do not block access." Karen ignored it, flailing her arms like she was leading a protest. When the police cruiser pulled up seconds later, she ran to it like it was a lifeline, demanding the arrest of whoever had authorized the tow. That would be me. I stepped forward, waving the signed lease with the armored truck company's logo clear as day. I didn't say much. Just smiled and said I own the driveway. She went silent for the first time in weeks. Now let's rewind to how we got here. Just a week before this scene unfolded, things were quiet. I had just finished repaving my private driveway a week ahead of schedule thanks to a rare break in the rain. After 6 months of planning and permits, the job was done and flawless. I even had a little celebration by grilling some burgers, thrilled that I no longer had to deal with the pothole from hell that had been haunting me for years. I live at the end of a cul-de-sac in a relatively calm neighborhood, except for one glitch in the matrix, and her name is Karen. Mid-50s, Botox-glazed scowl permanently fixed on her face, HOA vice president in her own mind, and the queen of weaponized entitlement. She had a reputation for organizing petitions against dogs barking past 7 p.m. and measuring grass length with a ruler. Still, I had managed to avoid direct confrontation with her until the morning after my driveway was redone. That Saturday morning I opened my door to grab the newspaper only to find a metallic monstrosity parked diagonally across the fresh blacktop. It was Karen's white luxury SUV with a glittery pink decal that said Princess in cursive font above the license plate. I stared at it for a few seconds, blinked, then turned around and walked straight to her door. She opened it after the second knock, wearing a satin robe and holding a celery smoothie like she was auditioning for Real Housewives. Before I could even speak, she waved her hand dismissively and said it's public access, and that I was lucky the HOA allowed me to even pave it. She closed the door in my face before I could respond. I stood there confused for a second. Public access, my name was on the property deed. The land survey clearly marked the driveway as mine. I had paid out of pocket for the paving and even cleared it with the city just to be safe. This wasn't a shared road or common area. Still, I gave her the benefit of the doubt. Maybe she misunderstood. I printed out a copy of the survey and slid it under her door along with a sticky note that said driveway is privately owned, not HOA property. The next morning the paper was taped to my front door with the word wrong written across it in red marker. That's when I realized I wasn't dealing with confusion. I was dealing with delusion. Over the next few days she escalated. First it was her SUV again. Then her gardener parked a truck there for 2 hours while trimming her hedges. One evening I came home to find her yoga class doing stretches right in front of my garage. I had to honk just to get through. When I asked them to move, one of the women said Karen told them it was a community space and that I was just being grumpy. I installed a small wooden sign that read private property, no parking. It was gone the next morning. At this point I was spending more time documenting her nonsense than enjoying the driveway I had worked so hard for. I filed a complaint with the HOA. They responded by saying that since the dispute involved property lines and not violations of bylaws, it was out of their jurisdiction. Convenient. Meanwhile Karen paraded around like she'd won some invisible war. I began getting notes in my mailbox from neighbors offering their sympathy and asking if I'd considered towing. Legally I could, but I didn't want to start World War III over it. At least not yet. Then the peanut butter incident happened. I had installed a security camera pointed at the driveway just to cover my bases. It wasn't even hidden. 2 days after setting it up, I checked the footage and nearly spat out my coffee. Karen had walked up at night, climbed onto a plastic stool, and smeared peanut butter directly onto the lens using a spatula. I don't know what disturbed me more, the act itself, or the fact that she had clearly planned it like some kind of guerrilla sabotage mission. That was the final straw. The next morning I was venting about the situation over coffee with an old friend named Reggie. He works in logistics for a regional armored truck company and burst out laughing when I told him about Karen's antic. He half joked, "You should lease it to us, we need suburban transfer points for cash pickup." I laughed too, but then we looked at each other for a few seconds and both nodded. A week later the paperwork was signed. The driveway was now leased commercial property with full legal backing for armored truck operations. I had permits from the city. The whole setup was legitimate. The first day the truck rolled in was poetry. A massive black vehicle pulled up with 2 armed guards who stepped out and placed orange cones at the base of the driveway. Karen came running outside in her slippers demanding answers. One of the guards pointed to the sign and calmly said, "This is a leased property, ma'am, please do not obstruct our operation." She lost it. I mean, full theatrical meltdown, screaming about property rights and neighborhood sanctity and something about the Constitution. The guards ignored her. So did I. I watched from my window sipping coffee like it was opening night of a Broadway show. And that brings us back to the tow. After repeatedly blocking the armored trucks and refusing to move her vehicle despite warnings, we finally called in a towing company. Legal. Documented. Filmed. Karen's tantrum made it even better. And when the cops showed up and I handed them the lease, they nodded and told her she had no grounds. Her face turned redder than a fire truck. It was beautiful. But this was only the beginning. Because Karen wasn't going down without a fight. Karen didn't just go down in flames after the tow, she lit a whole bonfire of vengeance and invited the HOA to dance around it. The next morning, I woke up to find a typed letter on my porch. It was printed on faux gold embossed paper with the HOA logo and read, as if someone had binge-watched legal dramas and copied random phrases. The letter accused me of unauthorized commercial activity, claimed I had violated neighborhood peace regulations, and demanded the immediate termination of my so-called industrial lease. I chuckled. For one, the HOA had no actual legal jurisdiction over my driveway since it wasn't common property. And two, I had already cleared everything with the city. But Karen wasn't banking on truth. She was banking on noise. By noon, she had mobilized her minions. 3 board members and 2 overly invested neighbors showed up at my door to discuss the issue. I invited them to bring their concerns to the city planning office. None of them did. Instead, they left with thinly veiled threats like, "We'll be forced to escalate this and you're setting a terrible example for the community." Karen didn't stop there. That same evening, 2 identical complaint emails landed in my inbox. One was from a Gmail account clearly belonging to her dog, judging by the name PrincessBoz54, and the other from what looked like a burner account. Both claimed the noise from the armored trucks had startled neighborhood children and caused widespread emotional distress. Mind you, these trucks were quieter than the garbage collector and only showed up twice a day for less than 10 minutes. The supposed noise complaints were about as valid as Karen's understanding of property law. Still, I decided it was time to get even more serious. I forwarded everything to Reggie, my armored truck contact, and he sent me a smiley face emoji followed by a scanned copy of our legal agreement, stamped and signed. I printed it out, laminated it, and nailed it to a post next to the driveway. That triggered phase 2 of Karen's meltdown. The next day, I spotted her standing by the new sign, squinting at it with her arms folded like she was reading the final lines of a cursed prophecy. She took a picture, called someone on speaker, and began ranting in rapid fire about zoning laws, unauthorized business activity, and how she would not rest until the driveway was clear of what she called armored pollution. The phrase stuck in my head. I almost wanted to get a t-shirt printed. 2 hours later, I received an official-looking envelope slid under my door. Another HOA notice. This one came with a cease and desist letter stating that the driveway lease constituted a violation of neighborhood character and visual harmony. I couldn't even make this stuff up. According to Karen, armored trucks were an eyesore and lowered property values. According to the city's zoning department, which I called the same afternoon, she was completely out of line. My property was not within the HOA's enforcement zone for commercial usage, and the lease didn't violate any codes. Things escalated fast after that. Karen started recording the truck arrivals, muttering threats under her breath loud enough for the guards to hear. One of them politely told her to remain on her own property. She called that harassment and sent a 2-page complaint to the police. They came by, asked a few questions, and left laughing once they saw the lease, the city permits, and the footage of Karen filming them like a rejected extra from a spy movie. But the best part was yet to come. One afternoon, as the truck pulled in, Karen decided to block it with her body. She marched onto the driveway in yoga pants and stood in front of the vehicle like she was reenacting a protest documentary. The guards didn't even get out. They just called their dispatcher, who called me, and I walked out with the police on the line. Karen shrieked about civil rights until the cruiser arrived and gently escorted her back to the sidewalk. At this point, Karen's antics had gone from annoying to comical. My neighbors started bringing out lawn chairs to watch the daily episodes of Karen vs. Reality. A few even started a group chat titled Driveway Drama, where they shared clips and screenshots. One neighbor edited a video of Karen yelling into a remix with dance music and uploaded it to TikTok. It went viral. I had no idea just how many people online loved watching an entitled HOA Karen getting checkmated in high definition. But the icing on the cake was the revelation that followed. I had quietly contacted the county to verify just how far Karen had been overstepping. Turns out, not only did she have no authority to declare the driveway public, she had submitted fake meeting notes to the HOA board to justify her claim. One of the board members, a semi-retired teacher named Ruth, confronted me with an apology and spilled everything. Karen had held a private vote with 3 hand-picked members, excluded others, and filed the notes claiming unanimous board support to reclassify the driveway. It was completely illegal. That was my turning point. I contacted a real estate attorney and filed a complaint. At the same time, Ruth and 2 other board members resigned in protest, stating that they didn't want to be complicit in any more of Karen's self-serving crusades. The HOA started crumbling from the inside. Half the residents now supported me openly. The other half had grown so tired of Karen's antics that they stopped responding to her group emails altogether. But Karen wasn't done. She doubled down. One night I caught her trying to post fake violation notices on my porch using old HOA stationery. I recorded her, of course. She fled before I could confront her, but not before smacking into my mailbox and leaving behind her phone. I turned it into the police as evidence of trespassing and harassment. What I found out later through the investigation made everything even more satisfying. Her phone had multiple draft emails addressed to various news outlets claiming she was the victim of a smear campaign orchestrated by a shadowy armored truck ring. I'm not kidding. She had typed out paragraphs accusing me of espionage, cash laundering, and federal overreach. It was lunacy in email form. So I printed one of those drafts and taped it to the wall in my garage like a trophy. The Karen Chronicles were in full swing now, but I had more leverage than ever. My lease was bulletproof, my permits were airtight, and Karen was unraveling faster than cheap yarn in a kitten's paws. She had no idea what was coming next, because I had just received a message from a local zoning officer who lived 2 blocks away. He had some news about Karen's house, and let's just say she wasn't quite as compliant with building permits as she wanted everyone to believe. The morning the video hit 1 million views was the same morning Karen tried to stage what she called a neighborhood emergency. It started with her planting herself at the head of the cul-de-sac, megaphone in hand, shrieking about community integrity, property misuse, and the dangers of militarization in the suburbs. She stood on a folding chair in front of her house like some rogue town crier, demanding the immediate removal of what she now called the armored menace. Her voice cracked with every syllable, but she had an audience, about 6 reluctant neighbors, most of whom looked like they regretted being there. She passed out flyers with badly photoshopped images of armored trucks running over flower beds and children's bikes. The flyers were titled, "Save Our Street," and featured my house circled in red like it was a crime scene. I picked one up from the gutter later and honestly couldn't stop laughing. By then, the armored truck operation had become routine. The vehicles arrived promptly, never stayed long, and kept everything orderly. The guards even greeted neighbors politely, and once helped a kid retrieve a soccer ball from under their front tire. They were more courteous than the pizza delivery guy. But Karen wasn't interested in facts. She was interested in narrative. And when the HLA board crumbled due to her own forged meeting minutes being exposed, she launched a full-blown social media war. She began uploading rants to a Facebook page she titled Suburban Defense League, claiming she was standing up for honest families against government overreach disguised as parking violation. Her videos were so over the top, people started following just for the comedy. One of her videos had dramatic music, black and white filters, and a slow zoom in on her face while she talked about surveillance trucks destroying the neighborhood vibe. Naturally, the internet had a field day. Someone stitched her video with footage of tanks rolling through a jungle and posted it with the caption, "Live footage from Karen's driveway war." Another user made a remix of her screaming, "This is illegal," on loop to techno music. Even I couldn't believe how quickly it spread. A local news anchor mentioned it briefly in a segment called Entitled People in the Wild, and Karen took that as a badge of honor. She printed a screenshot of the newscast and framed it on her porch. She truly believed she was gaining national support for her cause. But what she didn't know was that her desperate antics were catching the attention of people who actually had the power to dig into her own backyard. It started with a zoning officer named Carl who lived just outside the HOA limit. He was quiet, practical, and not particularly interested in drama. But when he saw Karen accusing the city of corruption and threatening to sue the planning office, he decided to take a look at her property file out of sheer curiosity. What he found was more amusing than shocking. Karen had added an extension to her garage 3 years ago without the required permit. Not only that, but she had installed a second-story office with tinted windows and surveillance equipment, which she claimed was for HOA safety monitoring. In reality, it was more like her private command center where she recorded neighbors' lawn activity and measured fence heights using a drone. Carl gave me a friendly call and mentioned what he found. I didn't ask for any action, but a week later Karen received an official notice of violation for unpermitted construction and was slapped with a fine. The look on her face when the inspectors arrived was priceless. She stood in the yard yelling that the city was retaliating against her for speaking the truth, while the inspector calmly took measurements and took photos of the structure. A few neighbors peeked from their blinds. One waved. Karen marched back inside and slammed the door so hard the wind knocked over one of her pink lawn flamingos. Things didn't stop there. Emboldened by her internet attention, Karen tried organizing a protest in front of my house. She posted about it for 3 days on every community Facebook page she could access, claiming we needed to rise against creeping surveillance disguised as cash transport. On the day of the protest, 2 people showed up. An elderly man who thought he was at a flea market and a teenager who came just to livestream Karen's meltdown. She tried to make it look like a movement by setting up a microphone and speakers, but the teenager filmed the whole thing and titled it Karen's Revolutionary War Against Parking Spaces. Within a few hours, the video had thousands of views. Karen tried to copyright strike it but failed. The teenager just uploaded a second video showing the copyright rejection email and called it Freedom of Screech Part 2. At this point, my armored truck contact Reggie was enjoying the drama almost as much as I was. He dropped off donuts for the guards as a thank you and even sent me a holiday card addressed to the bravest driveway in America. The city, meanwhile, had fully verified that everything about our lease and operations were aboveboard. Karen's complaints had been dismissed by every office she contacted. In retaliation, she filed a lawsuit in small claims court demanding emotional damages, claiming that the trucks caused her dog to develop anxiety and that she suffered sleep disruption due to backup alarms. Her filing included a blurry picture of a barking dog and a screenshot of her Fitbit sleep tracker. It didn't even list the correct legal name of my LLC, and she misspelled surveillance as surveillance in 4 separate places. The court date was set, and I showed up with Reggie, my lawyer, and a folder full of documentation. Karen showed up alone with a binder covered in glitter stickers. She opened with a speech that sounded like a school presentation gone off the rails. The judge interrupted her 5 times, finally asking her to stick to relevant facts. When I presented the lease, the permits, the city's approval letters, and a timeline of events including video footage, the judge blinked twice and asked Karen if she had read any part of property law. Her response was that common sense trumps paperwork, and that's when the judge ruled against her. The case was dismissed, and Karen was warned that further frivolous filings could lead to sanctions. By now, the neighborhood had fully turned against her. A neighbor named Doug made custom coffee mugs that read "Not My HOA President" and gave one to every house on the block. A few people had already filed for a vote to formally dissolve the HOA, citing mismanagement and abuse of power. Karen tried to hold an emergency meeting, but nobody showed up. I heard she sat in the community room alone for an hour, then went home and posted a blurry selfie captioned "The resistance continues." But the resistance was crumbling. Her authority was gone. Her protests were a joke. Her violations were stacking. And most ironic of all, the driveway she had once declared public was now more fortified, respected, and valuable than ever before. But Karen wasn't done yet. She still had one more act of sabotage up her sleeve. And this time, she would cross a line so bold it would finally backfire in a way no one could have predicted. The night Karen crossed the line was unusually quiet. No trucks. No protests. Not even one of her usual Facebook rants. It was a Wednesday, and I had just turned off the porch lights and settled into bed with a book when my phone buzzed. The notification was from my driveway camera. Motion detected. I tapped it out of habit, expecting a raccoon or maybe a late Amazon delivery, but what I saw made me sit straight up. Karen. Dressed in black from head to toe, hoodie pulled tight, sneakers laced like she was running a marathon, and a flashlight in one hand. She was crouched beside one of the orange traffic cones at the end of the driveway, fiddling with something. I blinked, then zoomed in. She was holding a large nail and what looked like a box cutter. She was trying to slash the tire of the armored truck parked there overnight for a scheduled morning run. She stopped every few seconds to check her surroundings like some cartoon burglar, but the camera got everything. High definition, clear audio, full face exposure. I called the police instantly. While I was on the line, Karen jabbed the tire with the nail, clearly struggling to penetrate it. Armored trucks don't exactly run on cheap rubber. The tire held firm. She tried again, slipped, and landed hard on her backside. That's when the truck's alarm activated. A soft chirp at first, then a loud, steady siren. The lights started flashing. Karen panicked, scrambled up, and bolted, except she didn't get far. One of the guards, who had been resting in the vehicle's cabin, burst out the side door and tackled her to the ground with professional ease. She screamed, flailed, and tried to claim he had assaulted her. The guard calmly held her until the police arrived, which took less than 4 minutes. When the officers reviewed the footage from my phone, one of them sighed and said something about repeat offenders always doing the dumbest things. They arrested her on the spot for attempted property damage, trespassing, and interference with commercial operations. But it didn't stop there. When the officers ran the truck's plates through their system, they discovered it was part of a special contract involving federal asset transfer. That meant Karen hadn't just tried to vandalize a vehicle, she had interfered with a federal service. The charges were upgraded. The officers placed her in the back of the cruiser, and for once, Karen had nothing to say. No screams. No rants. Just a pale, frozen face staring into the darkness. Word traveled fast. By morning, screenshots from the arrest footage had already hit the neighborhood group chat. Someone even made a meme of Karen being tackled with the caption "Resistance Level 0." I didn't celebrate. Not immediately. I knew better. Karen always found a way to spin things. Sure enough, within 2 days she was out on bail and back home. And while her mugshot had already circulated online, she still tried to walk the streets like nothing had happened. She even sent out an email claiming the arrest was staged by a corrupt city cabal working in league with private contractors. Nobody believed it. Most people ignored it. But I kept my guard up. Then came the surprise that flipped everything upside down. A lawyer's letter showed up in my mailbox. But it wasn't for me. It was addressed to Karen, carelessly placed in the wrong box. I didn't read it. I handed it to the postman the next day. But I did notice the return address. It was from a major corporate office downtown. And that same afternoon, a city inspector showed up. Not for me, but for Karen's property. I watched from a distance as he took photos of her garage, her side fence, and her so-called office upstairs. A few hours later, a second vehicle pulled up. This time it was from the county clerk's office. Whatever Karen had been doing with that illegal second-floor build was now officially under scrutiny. That weekend, Karen vanished. No sightings. No rants. No HOA emails. Not a single social post. Then, quietly, a moving truck arrived late at night. A few men in uniforms carried boxes out of her house and loaded them into the back. Karen emerged once, wrapped in a coat and sunglasses, face downcast. She didn't speak to anyone. A neighbor tried to say something. She waved them off and went back inside. Within 2 hours, she was gone. House locked. Curtains drawn. The mailbox overflowing by Monday. I later heard she had moved in with her sister across town while sorting out her legal issues. The house stayed empty. Overgrown lawn. No lights. Just silence. With Karen gone, the HOA essentially collapsed. The president resigned. The treasurer apologized to the neighborhood in a mass email. A vote was held and passed to dissolve the entire association within 3 weeks. No more fake fines. No more rulers measuring lawn height. No more Karen. Peace returned to the cul-de-sac like a long-lost guest. I canceled the armored truck lease once the schedule was fulfilled, and the company even sent me a generous thank you bonus for the hassle. They left behind the upgraded gate system they had installed for access security and told me to keep it. I did. The driveway now had automatic entry detection, security lighting, and a sensor that politely beeped if an unauthorized vehicle approached. I joked with Reggie that I now had the most secure patch of pavement in the entire county. But even with the drama behind us, Karen's chaos left its mark in ways I hadn't expected. I got an email from a major YouTube content creator asking if they could license my security footage for a video on HOA disasters. Another request came from a local podcast that wanted to interview me for their Entitled Neighbor series. One person offered to buy my entire property just to build a themed Airbnb around the whole incident. I declined, of course, but it amazed me how fast the story had spread. It wasn't just a neighborhood saga anymore. It was a digital legend. One day, while sipping coffee on my porch, I saw a kid ride by on his bike wearing a shirt that said "Not today, Karen." I didn't know him. Probably from a few streets over. He waved. I waved back. The silence was golden. The air clear. For the first time in months, the view down my driveway felt peaceful. And all it had taken was one woman's entitled crusade, a federal armored truck, and a neighborhood finally saying no. But I had one final surprise in store. Because while the HOA may have been dead, and Karen out of sight, the saga wasn't quite over. Not yet. Something big was about to drop. And this time, I wouldn't even have to lift a finger. Because justice, it seemed, had a way of finishing what it started. Weeks passed in an almost eerie calm. The kind of quiet you don't question too much for fear of disturbing it. With Karen gone and the HOA officially dissolved, the neighborhood began to breathe again. Front yards flourished, people actually smiled while walking their dogs, and nobody received passive-aggressive notes about garden gnomes or curtain colors. The peace was so refreshing, it almost felt like a different place altogether. I spent my mornings sipping coffee on my now iconic driveway, the one that had gone from a patch of asphalt to a national meme in the span of 2 months. My inbox still buzzed from time to time with collaboration requests and interview offers, but I politely declined most of them. I didn't want fame. I just wanted peace. Or at least that's what I thought, until the opportunity landed in my lap. It started with an unexpected email from a tech firm I had never heard of. They were developing a pilot program for autonomous delivery vehicles and were scouting discreet, legally accessible suburban properties to use as overnight recharge and dispatch points. Apparently, one of their execs had seen my story online, laughed for 20 minutes, and then pitched my property to the board as the ideal test site. It had everything they needed: privacy, legal clearance, and a proven track record of surviving lunacy. At first, I hesitated. Leasing my driveway again so soon after the chaos felt like tempting fate. But after reading through the terms, including their generous monthly offer and clause allowing me to terminate at any time, I agreed. After all, this time there'd be no massive trucks, no uniformed guards, just small, sleek pods rolling in quietly, charging, and rolling out. The setup was so subtle, most neighbors didn't even notice. The pods looked like oversized Roombas with wheels, and they beeped politely before reversing. Meanwhile, Karen remained a ghost. Rumors swirled. She was allegedly staying with family, undergoing therapy, possibly planning to sue the city, or maybe just spiraling into conspiracy forums. Nobody really knew. Her house sat dark and unloved, a daily reminder of how far entitlement could crash when met with reality. One day, a real estate agent came by and slapped a for sale sign in the yard. I chuckled when I saw the listing description. Charming home with community potential, motivated seller, minor zoning irregularities. I printed it out and tacked it to my fridge like a souvenir. And then, without warning, she returned. Not with sirens, not with flyers or megaphones. Just a quiet afternoon appearance during a community garage sale. She was thinner, pale, wearing oversized sunglasses and a baseball cap pulled low. She browsed like a stranger, head down, saying nothing. Most people gave her space, a few just walked away. I saw her eyeing a table of lawn decor, specifically a small pink flamingo that looked suspiciously like the ones that used to decorate her own yard. She picked it up, turned it over, then set it down. And then she made the mistake of walking past my driveway. She didn't stop, didn't speak, but the security system recognized her plate the moment her SUV inched near. The gate remained firmly shut. A soft message played from the speaker system. Access denied. She froze, glanced up at the camera, then drove off without a word. Later that evening, I checked the footage. Her face, barely visible beneath the hat and glasses, wore the same expression I remembered from the day her car got towed. A mix of disbelief, rage, and helplessness. But there was something else too: defeat. I figured that would be the last I'd see of her. But Karen had one final card to play. Not an outburst. Not sabotage. A desperate plea. She emailed me. A 3-paragraph message starting with no subject line and no greeting. She said she never intended for things to escalate the way they did. That the driveway issue had been a misunderstanding. That she had felt threatened by the changes in the neighborhood. She said the arrest had ruined her reputation, her finances, and nearly cost her her career. And then, the kicker, she asked if I would be willing to write a letter to the court affirming that I no longer saw her as a threat, so her record could be sealed and she could start fresh. I sat with that email for a long time. I read it 3 times. Each time, the anger and comedy of the past months resurfaced like old ghosts. But I wasn't bitter. Not anymore. I wasn't interested in dragging her through the mud. She had done that well enough herself, and I certainly wasn't interested in vengeance for the sake of it. So I responded. I told her I would not oppose any sealing of records, that I didn't intend to press further charges, and that as far as I was concerned, it was over. But I added one sentence at the end. I hope you finally understand the difference between private property and public entitlement. Weeks later, I got a notice from the court. Her record was sealed under a probationary agreement, provided she avoided any further disturbances or community violations. She officially sold her house that same month. The new owners moved in with a pair of twin boys, a trampoline, and a dog that barked with joyful abandon. I met them the second day. They had no idea about the saga that preceded them, and I didn't bring it up. Some stories are better left offline. But not all of it disappeared. One evening, I sat outside as a neighbor approached with a gift. It was a small wooden sign shaped like a street marker. It read Karen's Curve and had a cartoon of an SUV trying to climb over an armored truck. We laughed until our sides hurt. We mounted it on a fence post near the mailbox as a friendly warning to future drive-by dictators. A relic of chaos now tamed. The autonomous pods still come and go. The driveway hums with quiet efficiency. The gate opens on cue. Visitors stay where they should. And as for me, I enjoy every inch of pavement like it's paved in gold. Because maybe it is. Not from money, not from tech, but from the satisfaction of knowing I stood my ground when it mattered. And when Karen tried to bulldoze through that line, she learned the hard way that some boundaries are made of more than asphalt. They're made of principle. And this time, principle won.